Hey, this is PEP 406, Curriculum Design and Physical Education, and we are on the first video, but the second lecture in Module 3, which is Chapter 3, Building a Quality Physical Education Curriculum. So today, here's our topics for the day. We're going to talk about the process of learning and how that is important to understand that in building a curriculum. We'll talk about developing a philosophy, and this is your teaching philosophy as well as developing a philosophy about curriculum development and how you should go about that to make sure you stay student-centered. We'll talk about individual and programmatic philosophies. Those are the two different kinds of philosophies you have in curriculum development. We'll start diving into what unpacking the standards means, and we'll get you ready for the final part of Chapter 3, which will be coming up next week. All right, so let's start out with some definitions. So let me get my head out of the way here. There's a couple, two things that are important we need to talk about. We need to understand the process of learning, and you're going to hear this throughout your whole career in education, unpacking the standards. And what does that mean? So I'll define that for you and give you some ideas so you have a good understanding when you start working on curriculum, what unpacking the standards means. So we'll start out here with the process of learning. It involves active learners posing questions. So this will be your students. As you teach them, they'll pose questions to you. They might ask questions. You might have to actually ask them questions to get them to respond and then give them some why to dig deeper. You're going to talk about problem solving possible answers. Don't always just give the students the answer when they ask the question. Sometimes ask, well, what do you think? Well, give me your thought process. What would you do in this situation? And then try to help lead them to the correct answer. So let students problem solve some of their answers. You're going to teach them a variety of characteristics, knowledge, and skills, but let them use that characteristic, knowledge, and skills throughout both group, individual, and whole class learning opportunities. And then another part of the definition here of the process of learning to help us understand what that means is transferring new knowledge to other contents and settings. So when you're teaching somebody something, say we're talking about when you're kicking the ball and the difference between indoor and outdoor soccer, how indoor soccer the ball is going to be faster on the floor, and when you get outdoor, it depends on how high the grass is. If it's a really shortcut pitch, the ball is going to move faster. If it's a little bit higher grass, it's going to move slower. So you can talk about force and friction and relate that to a science class. There's always a lot of ideas in physical education. We should really be able to integrate our subject matter into other subject matters across the curriculum. The next important thing we need to kind of understand how to define is unpacking the standards. The first week back to school, every time when I was a teacher, we talked about unpacking the standards a lot and developing new curriculum and new things we were going to do for the school year, which I usually had already planned out way before that. And most teachers do. They take some of the end of their summer to plan out their new activities. So when we talk about unpacking the standards, you want to define the standards to clarify what they mean. What we'll talk about a lot in our whole program here, the NASP standards, because they're the overarching standards that you could use no matter where you're teaching, those 5 NASP standards. In the Missouri public schools, you're going to look at the DESE approved GLEs and GLOs. But if you look at the GLEs and GLOs, which we will later in this module, you'll see the first thing they do is tie themselves to a NASP standard, and then they break it down a little bit further. So you have to understand those NASP standards, and then you have to start understanding what the standards mean as you tear them apart, unstrand them, or what we call unpack them. As we unpack the standards, we explain what skills students should be able to demonstrate. It's no longer just standard number 1 looking at movement patterns. It's going to be what exact movement patterns are we looking at? What locomotor, what non-locomotor, and what manipulative skills should they be able to demonstrate at this grade level within the curriculum? And then the last part here on unpacking the standards, after we know what students are going to be able to do, we have to understand how they might be achieved and how to measure student success. So this part is, what is our actual instructional methods? What are the activities we're going to do to teach the students these skills related to these standards? So if you think about it, unpacking the standards is kind of the reverse of backwards mapping. You're going to look at the overarching goal, and then you're going to break it down to actually how it's taught. All right, so we'll understand how they might be achieved. What are we going to do? Are we going to do some demonstrations to start out with? Are we going to let students work in small groups to have some guided practice where us as a teacher guides them? Will we go to some peer guided practice where they get peer feedback and peer observation? And then some independent practice. And the independent practice might also be where they're working alone at home. They could be working in a drill setting while the teacher is walking around, working with various groups, right? And then how we can put those skills back to work in the concept of something bigger. It could be a game if we're talking team sports, or it could be how they're going to use those characteristics, skills, and knowledge in other subjects in life. So how do we even develop a philosophy? All right, there are two major ideas or categories of philosophies. You will work as yourself, and you will do this no matter if you're working in a group or not. You'll have your own individual philosophy. Individual philosophy. That's how your personal philosophy, beliefs, and values influence how you interpret the standards. All right? So think about that a little bit. How do your beliefs and values influence the NASP standards? If you don't really value health-related fitness, personally, you need to at least consider the philosophy of how your students should value that, and then maybe you can value that yourself. I know I myself is a little bit overweight. I should probably eat better, have a little bit more activity in my life. So how's my personal philosophy on myself help me interpret curriculum? When I first started teaching, I wanted to teach at the high school because I really like teaching the team sports aspects, as well as individual sports, recreation sports, lifetime sports, more of the stuff that's getting you ready to move on to life. But as I progressed, I saw the importance of breaking down the skills and understanding how to build the motor skills from the beginning on up. So I think my individual philosophy my first year in teaching was probably a little too centered around games and team sports. And then as I progressed and got more knowledge, my individual philosophy changed to incorporate everything that's important in the realm of physical activity and health. All right, so our next part of our philosophy, next category we're going to discuss today is a programmatic philosophy. All right, this is how different philosophies can be blended to create a coherent, meaningful physical education curriculum. So when we're talking about an individual philosophy and a programmatic philosophy, that could be philosophies of program organization, of education, of teaching, but how we're going to relate it to this class is the individual and programmatic philosophies that relate to developing curriculum and lessons, planning lessons and assessments and stuff of that sort. So in a programmatic philosophy, that's where a group usually comes together. In a large district, it might be several PE teachers from each building or one PE teacher from each level is on a PE curriculum committee. In a smaller district, it might be all the PE teachers, and in a real small district, it may just be you as an individual. So if you think about it, two heads are always better than one. Sometimes there's some friction and there's some give and take, but as there's give and take, we learn to grow. So that's really good to have some differing opinions when you're building a programmatic philosophy. It usually actually opens up the curriculum to bring in more things. So the best concept for curriculum development is have everyone work on the committee, unless it's just too big and it gets muddled. So you'd have a committee approach. You're going to blend different philosophies, backgrounds, ideas, but make sure you're meeting both your district, state, and national mandates. That can be a stressful process. Some people might want to teach one thing, and other people might want to teach another thing. But you have to remember also it's critical to stay aligned between elementary, your lower elementary to upper elementary, that you're teaching the background skills that they're going to need at the next level, and then from your elementary to your middle school. And there has to be, remember, that sequence of activities where students can grow over time. Students shouldn't just be introduced to a skill at the high school level. They should have seen that somewhere before, or at least the foundational skills. So when everyone involved in the process, even if people don't agree with it or they don't get everything they want in the curriculum, when you're involved in the process, there's more of an opportunity to take some ownership in it. Hey, I helped develop that. And that leads to more buy-in from the teachers. So like I said, it depends on what size school district you're at. You might be tasked with developing the curriculum because there's only you or one other PE teacher if you're at a really small district. And in a large district, like I said, there's going to be give and take, and it might seem a little more of a daunting task. So let's talk about the individual philosophy a little deeper. As teachers reflect on what they see as the goods of PE, we remember what the goods of PE are, they start to identify what they personally value about the process of learning. So remember, the goods of PE are the consumer product, or what students should take away from our class and use in their life right now and in the future. So if you think about that, our value around the process of learning should be a little bit different. As I dug deeper into it, I needed to teach my students how to set goals, how to self-reflect, how to self-evaluate, how to peer evaluate, all right? And those things, and I always needed to remember, even though we might be in a team sports unit, that the whole goal is to create healthy people that can participate in activities across the lifespan. So we always need to remember NASB standard number 3 should kind of be an overarching standard that weaves through all of our standards, where we talk about health-related fitness and activity patterns and nutrition and things like that, because our end goal is to develop healthy people. And then we have to open up our curriculum too to different activities so they can develop the skills to participate in different activities over the lifespan. I've said this in a variety of classes. You've heard me say it before. When you end your interscholastic competition, whether it's at the middle school level, at the high school level, or if you go on to persist and play in college athletics, most of the sports you play, team sports, are never going to be played exactly the same before. Whether you change from football to playing flag football, or soccer to playing indoor soccer, or basketball to playing some 3-on-3 with friends, it's going to be a little bit different. So we have to remember, as we graduate from high school or graduate out of our team sports, we need to have the skills to do some of those individual dual and lifetime activities that aren't always on the radar to teach in high school, that we really should ensure we have that focus as teachers. So this leads, like I said, as we look at what do we value and about the process of learning and what our end goals are, this leads to the intentional development of your own philosophy. You have to intentionally think about it to develop your philosophy. Yes, you're going to do what you're going to do. Things are ingrained, but the more you reflect and think, you'll intentionally develop a much improved and progressive philosophy as you work through your career and gain some experience. Your personal philosophy of PE serves as the lens in which you view these standards and GLEs and GLOs and guide your own curriculum decision. Remember, it's not just about what you're an expert at. You have to learn a variety of things to be able to teach your students the right scope and sequence of activities. So let's dig a little bit deeper into a programmatic philosophy. What does a programmatic philosophy mean? It really means you're working as a program to develop a philosophy in which the whole PE program is going to flow from K to 12. Right? So what's going to take place in this? There's going to have to be some collaboration. You're going to have to work with different colleagues to develop this philosophy. There may be some give and take. There may be some time after school that you're going to have to meet, or over the summer. But this is basically where teachers work with colleagues and combine their core values and collective beliefs to develop a philosophy to guide what teaching and learning physical education in this school or school district or program actually means. So what that is, that's the blending of various individual philosophies, and we need to make sure it provides a meaningful and consistent physical education program. What does consistent mean? That means it's aligned. Like I said, there's a natural sequence and progression of activities from K to 3, from 4 to 6, from middle school to high school. So the skills need to build on top of each other. So the blending of philosophies from a number of different teachers might be challenging. It could be a little bit stressful, especially if you're pretty far apart. But it's necessary to work together and to actually stretch our own thinking to help provide our students with a meaningful and consistent physical education program that meets their long-term needs. Remember, when we're thinking about a programmatic philosophy, we need to stay student-centered and always consider what the students' needs are. Now, there's going to be some things that come into effect there. What do we have in the budget? What equipment do we have? What can we go get? What's our environment? All right. But we want to try to stay as student-centered as possible to give the students what they need to meet that big end goal of living a healthy lifestyle with a variety of lifelong activities. So how do we make sense of it all? All right. So I'm going to blend the standards into how I'm explaining a philosophy here. So you'll see S whatever, and that's the NASP standard 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So philosophy of PE may state the ultimate goal for physical education is to provide students the learning that leads to a physically active lifestyle to promote health and fitness. That would be tied into standard number 3. That would actually probably be tied into the direction that physical education and health is going currently in schools. So for students to choose to be physically active, it requires them to value an activity. So we need to teach students to value the activity for self-expression, for challenge, for cooperation, for being a part of a team. And that is wrapped around standard 5, which kind of is one of those standards that wraps around everything, but we have to intentionally do it. We have to ask students to reflect, ask them why they like doing it, why they don't like doing it, to help them value a certain activity. Next, students should value and enjoy an activity. It usually comes from some certain level of competence or a level of performance and motor skills. And that goes back to standard number 1. For you to be successful in an activity, you need to have the motor skills and patterns to be able to do it, even if it's an individual activity. A team activity pulls standard 1 and 2 together. So if you look at the purple here, the sufficient knowledge of how to use motor skills in a certain setting is standard number 2. I not only need to have the competence to actually physically perform motor skills, I also need to know when to use which one and how they apply to different settings. That might be spatial awareness. That might be understanding that if somebody's close to me, I have to slow down or I might run into them. It might be spatial awareness in a game type setting, right? It is important to be able to practice or play cooperatively with others and have some good teamwork and communication, all right? That goes to NASP standard number 4, actually. I have that one wrong. All right. And you must have an adequate fitness level to persist in activity. So that goes to standard number 3. Students need to have a standard level of fitness, have been doing activity to be able to continue to perform, or else they'll get tired. When people get tired, they don't do the movement patterns right. They don't perform as well. So it's important to have some kind of adequate fitness level. We should always talk about that too. If we're doing team sports in a class, we should talk about heart rate and flexibility and different muscle movements and strength to tie that back to our overarching goal of this philosophy of standard number 3. All right. So the top philosophy in blue here, focused on standard number 3, providing students learning that leads to a physically active lifestyle. Another individual might have a different philosophy. Their philosophy could start out by stating the ultimate goal for PE is to teach skills and knowledge for understanding and competence. That would be based on standard number 1 and standard number 2. They want people to have the physical skills, the motor skills, and the knowledge and understanding to be able to use those in a setting. So their philosophy might focus around NASP standard 1 and 2. Now, it's great when we talk about the programmatic philosophy to blend these two different philosophies together. All right. So that is how we put it all together. An individual philosophy, I broke down what it could mean, and then how two different philosophies could be a little bit different. And then when you blend these two philosophies together, that's called making a programmatic philosophy. So you're going to have an assignment. I'll provide you with an assignment handout. I probably did that to you last time in class, but if not, when you look at the philosophy of curriculum development assignment, the second line down in text says assignment document link. So if you click on that and download it, it's going to have the whole document that I handed out in class to explain this assignment. So see that assignment handout for more details. But the background is, this is the cumulative summative assessment for Module 3, and it's going to tie everything together. So you're going to develop a 1 to 2 page essay on your philosophy of developing curriculum for PE. All right, so you're going to use some of this information I just went over in this video. You'll refer back to some of these notes. I expect college level writing. There's an outline on the handout where you're going to have 4 sections, an introduction, and I'll tell you what I want in your introduction. Then we'll talk about building the philosophy, building the curriculum, and I give you some ideas of what I want there. Section 3 is going to talk about how we connect to standards and GLEs and GLOs and the Show Me standards. You will actually get some of that information later. You could start this assignment right now, but I don't think you can complete it till after you've watched the next video in this series and got through the whole module here. All right, so follow, and then you're going to have a conclusion where you tie everything together. So follow that outline provided in 4 sections. Right, so you're going to use information from the entire chapter 3 reading and module 3, which includes a series on aligning and connecting standards to GLEs, GLOs, and the Show Me standards, plus your previous experience, education, and other classes to write this philosophy. This is something that we're going to put together in a culminating activity for the class, so do a really good job. You're going to copy and paste it into another activity. It should be something that you should put in your professional portfolio when you go out and interview. And it's something you can always read over to help prep you for an interview, because you're going to get asked a curriculum question or 2 in a PE teaching interview. So like I said, this is a culminating activity. See the due date on Canvas, and make sure you do that. It's not due in the next day or 2. It's due at the end of the module. But I wanted to put this information right here because we just started talking about philosophy, and you can probably do Section 1 and Section 2 of the paper right now, and then you'll start working on Section 3 and 4 as we progress in this module. So let's get back to a little bit more information before we wrap up for today. Let's talk about unpacking the standards. And we gave you a definition at the beginning of this lecture, and I explained what unpacking the standards means. But it actually means taking the standards, breaking them down to use a standard to develop units, to develop lessons, and to develop assessments to the lessons. So this is how you merge your philosophy with the standards. This is how we move from the global concept of the NASB standards into the idea of a specific curriculum. The curriculum must be aligned to standards. They must use the GLEs, but they're going to be developed to foster your individual student learning. Just because you have a curriculum guide developed that you worked on doesn't mean you can't adapt because of the baseline level of your students. So we'll take our global concept of the NASB standards. They're real broad, foundational. We're going to learn how to use the GLEs and GLOs that are attached or fall under the umbrella of each standard. And then we will then tease that out into individual units and individual lessons. So that is what we mean when we talk about unpacking the standards. We start at the standard and we end up back at the lesson. We don't say, hey, I'm going to teach dribbling, shooting, and passing in basketball. What standards does that fit? We should look at the standards first and then figure out what we're going to teach under them, not look at what we want to teach and then see how they connect to the standards. All right? Remember, student learning is the main goal, and it must be the focus of a quality curriculum and quality instruction. So we need to look at how we're going to teach all the standards, how we're going to meet those grade level expectations to get students to do things that are on grade level. And other subject areas, they're going to test to make sure students are at grade level, and that's how the school is going to turn in their data to be accredited through the MSEP program. So, unpacking the standards. Let's think about this a little bit. Content and delivery are critical to this. So what curriculum model would you use to teach something? We'll go over the curriculum models later in Unit 2 of this course, but you should have been introduced to some of them already. The skill theme approach, where you teach the skills first and then you put them into themes. Teaching games for understandings, where you teach strategies and tactics of different ideas such as net games or invasion games, and then you relate those back to the skill involved in a specific game. So you'll have to look when you're unpacking the standards, once you determine what content you're going to use, what curriculum, main theme, instructional model, it can be called all of those different things, you'll use to teach that specific lesson. And the best way is to vary your approach. You may have a go-to approach, but you should vary your approach. When you've already taught tennis and you're teaching badminton or volleyball later, you could use the teaching games for understanding model when you start talking about strategy, even if that's not your overarching model throughout the whole unit. So then it's critical, what activities will you actually choose to teach? These are the actual lessons. So you've looked at the standard, you've looked at the grade level expectation, so you've broke down that standard to kind of a skill. You looked at the curriculum model, how do you think you're going to teach it? And then you pick the activities you think you need to teach. Now you may bounce back and forth here between number 1 and number 2. You might choose a curriculum or instructional model, and then when you look at your activities, you might have to alter that model by the activity. That's perfectly okay. That is really designing effective curriculum. And then after that, after you figure out your activities, you look at your curriculum model, how it aligns, you'll really start writing down and understanding how best to teach the content to meet the standard. So you're going to teach content for the activity, but it needs to also meet the standard at the top, so it would stay completely aligned in the curriculum development process. So then this is basically number 3, is what skills and concepts you're going to teach. All right, what drills or activities you're going to do. And then you have to also think, how am I going to assess that as I go to make sure my students understand and can perform at the quality level we expect them. All right, if you need a little bit more information on unpacking the standards on content and delivery, it's on page 43 and 44 of the text. So let's do an activity. This is a journal activity. We're not going to turn this in on Canvas, but I expect you to do this activity on a clean sheet of paper, write it out, because you're going to then put it in your portfolio, and you're going to bring it to class next time we meet, and be prepared to share in class discussion, because we're going to open class discussing how we might unpack standard number 3. So think about NASP standard number 3. It is students how they're going to consider living a healthy, productive, lifelong lifestyle focused on health, fitness, and wellness. All right. So what would it look like for students to demonstrate their knowledge and skills to achieve and maintain a health-enhancing level of physical activity and fitness? What does that look like? So think back before this. What activities would you do? What could some of the different lessons you could be? All right. So I'd like you to write down 3 to 5 lesson ideas, at least 3 to 5 different drill ideas, maybe a drill or activity, probably 2 for each of those lessons, all right, that could relate back to students maintaining a health enhancing level of physical activity and fitness. So this should be completely, they should all be different, all right? So let's see how well you can unpack standard number 5. Like I said, give me 3 to 5 activities, and under each of those, give me at least 2 different ways, skills, maybe even more, 3 or 4, that you would use in sequence to teach that activity. But make sure those 3 to 5 activities are completely different. All right. So we always need to think the overarching standard number 3. Standard number 3 should be overarching and intertwined in everything we do, because developing healthy individuals ties into our Show Me standards and our GLEs and our mission. All right. So think about this a little bit. Write it down in your portfolio, and let's have a good class discussion next time we meet on how we unpack standard number 3. So what are we going to do when we come back next time? we're really going to go through, I'm going to see how you did on this. We'll start some discussion, see where we're at after we've had a couple of lectures. We're going to go through and work on unpacking all 5 of the NASP standards to see what that looks like. We'll talk about different curriculum and instructional models, different activities, different ways you could go for each standard to get you a deeper understanding of what unpacking a NASP standard really is. But hopefully by doing this, you'll be able to demonstrate at least your baseline knowledge. So what's our to-do list? All right, make sure you go back to Canvas and look at the full Module 3 activities and assignment list and the due dates. But your to-do list, after you completed watching this video, is, if you haven't yet, read Chapter 3, Building a Quality PE Curriculum. All right, it's critical we only read 3 or 4 chapters in Unit 1 here. Make sure you read this chapter and you understand what building a quality PE curriculum looks like. Because that's going to be critical to your success in some of these assignments and your overall understanding and your ability to be successful in number 3 here, the Chapter 3 quiz. So start working on your assignment, Philosophy of Curriculum Development. See your details on Canvas. The assignment's not due right now. It's a culminating summative activity, but you should be able to do the first half, Part 1 and Part 2, and have that out of the way, which should be about a page. All right. So you can have that done after this. Look at it, look closely, make sure you download that document, and you get started on that activity. And then take Chapter 3 quiz. You'll complete that on Canvas. There's 10 multiple choice and true and false questions. Select the best answer. You have 20 minutes. All the safeguards are employed as I do in a normal quiz. But Chapter 3 quiz is to assess your comprehension on the reading, as well as 1 or 2 things throughout the lecture and video lecture. All right. Hopefully you kind of got a good understanding of some of our objectives for the day. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. If not, I'll see you in class next time. Thanks for attending, and have a great day.